With the permission management in awork, you can customize your workspace and easily represent different hierarchy levels and organizational structures. Who's allowed to see and access which projects? Who can add tasks in the project? In this video, I will show you how the permission management in awork works and how you can configure different roles according to your needs. At the end of the video, you will know how to define that the team leader can coordinate tasks of his team and evaluate the track times, that different team members get full access to all project details but not to the time reports or details of other team members, or that different locations, departments and other organizational units can only access and edit their own projects. But let's start from the beginning. You can find the permission management under Settings, Permissions. Since editing the different roles has far-reaching effects on the entire workspace, this is of course only accessible to administrators. Basically, all roles in awork are freely and individually configurable, so you can adapt them perfectly to your organizational structure. Of course, this also means that you can add roles according to your needs via the green plus or delete them via the action menu. The permission management in awork has a two-tier structure. There are workspace-wide permission roles, the so-called global roles, and there are project-based permission roles. Each user is always assigned exactly one global role. It defines what a user is generally allowed to see and do in the workspace and therefore also applies across projects. You assign it for the first time when you invite the user to your workspace. If you want to assign a different global role to the user later, you can do this a little further down in the permission management via the drop-down menu. Whenever a user is assigned to a project role must be assigned to him that is only valid for this one project. The assignment takes place directly in the course of the staffing. This project role can extend the rights defined by the global role of the user on the level of the individual project. For example, if a user only has read permissions to tasks according to his global role, he can be granted write permissions for tasks via a project role on the individual project. Important to know, the project role can only extend the global rights, but not restrict them. If, for example, a user with the global role admin, which always has full permissions, is assigned to a project, no rights can be taken away from him by its project role. Since the assignment of the project role is always project-specific, a certain user can have different permissions on different projects, depending on the roles assigned to him for the respective projects. Let's now take a closer look at the global roles. Here, there are two exceptions regarding customizability, because two roles are set by awork, the roles admin and guest. There always needs to be at least one admin in the workspace who has all permissions and can manage the workspace. The role guest is intended for users who are invited on a guest license. You can find more info about the guest role by clicking the link in the video description. Let's take a look at the definition of a role. The definition includes the four sections: projects, users, clients, and settings. In the Projects section, you first set whether this role is allowed to create new projects. You can further segment your workspace using the setting Own Teams Projects Only. If you enable this feature, the accessibility of projects for users with this role will be limited to projects that are assigned to awork teams they belong to. For example, if you have created awork teams for departments and you enable this feature, then members of the marketing team will only be able to see projects to which the marketing team is assigned. It's important to mention here that you do not have to activate this restriction for every global role in the workspace. Also, a user can be a member of several teams, and several teams can be assigned to one project. You can find more information about working with the teams in the Help Center article, which we have also posted in the video description. Next, we use the project details to set whether users with this role can access or edit all projects in the workspace, or, due to the team restriction, all projects of their team. If you select None, users will only be able to see projects that they have created themselves or that they have been directly assigned to. A user can always access projects he is directly assigned to. If you set write permissions here, The project details can be edited, for example the description, the budget, or the project settings. The setting for the project tasks is the same as for the project details. Here, too, a user always has write permissions for tasks that he has created or to which he is assigned. This also applies if you are only assigned to tasks, but not to the associated project. At the end of the section, you have to define if this role is allowed to read or edit all times of all users on the visible projects. If you choose none here, users can only view their own time entries and change them afterwards. Important to know, with the setting none, users with this role have no access to awork's time reports area. There's one exception, which I will get to in a moment. In the user section, we first set whether we want to enable the teams restriction for the visibility of other users. If it's enabled, users with this role will only see other users who are in the same teams. This restriction does not have to go hand in hand with a setting at the project level. You can set it, for example, on the project level, but leave it open for the users. After that, we define if this role is allowed to view or edit details of other users, for example their contact data. If you select none, this will result in not being able to select other users, for example, to assign them to projects or tasks. For this reason, we recommend for most setups and roles to select at least read permissions here. Now let's take a look at user times. Here is the exception I talked about above. If you set read or write permissions here, users with this role can access the time report area. They will not only see track times on projects, but also time entries of users which were made independent of projects. Interesting to know, if the teams restriction for users is activated, access is of course limited to the visible users, meaning the users belonging to their own teams. Times of users from other teams cannot be viewed then. With the permissions for user planning, you determine whether this role can access the planner area, and thus the capacity planning in awork. This requires at least read permissions here. If you also want to allow the role to schedule tasks for other users in their calendars, write permissions are required here. The settings for clients define whether this role is allowed to view or edit customers that have been created in awork or even create new ones. Finally, let's look at the settings section. By activating the project settings, you allow this role to create, edit, or delete project templates. The same applies to the project types under categories. The task settings behave identically. Here we look at the task templates and the types of work that are essential for tasks and time tracking. Since the types of work have this important function, it is recommended to manage them centrally if you want to use a defined set, for instance for accounting purposes. However, you don't have to deactivate the toggle for this. You can also simply switch off the menu access to the categories. This way, you remove the access to the editing for users with this role. I'll show you how this works in a moment. Finally, we use the workspace settings to determine whether this role is allowed to do certain basics in the workspace administration. Since these permissions reach very far, we recommend disabling the toggle in most scenarios. Now we come to the menu visibility I just mentioned. If you want to make certain tool areas inaccessible for other users with this role, you can simply hide them via the menu visibility tab. Areas in awork that the user cannot see anyway due to the lack of permissions are already grayed out. For example, here you can remove access to the categories to which the project types and the type of works belong. Let's go quickly through this role again. A user who is my global senior role is allowed to create projects, and the selection of projects he can access is not limited to the project of his teams. Regardless of the assignment to projects, users with this role can not only view but also edit all projects in the workspace. The same applies to all project tasks. On all projects, this user can access the track times but not edit them. At the same time, he is able to access the time reports area. Users with a senior role see all other users in the workspace and edit their details. All tracked user times, including project-independent ones, can be accessed with this role. In addition, my senior role is able to access the capacity planning via the planner and schedule tasks for other users down to the calendar level. All customers may be edited and newly created. Exactly the same applies to project and task templates, as well as project types and types of work. Changes to workspace settings, on the other hand, are not possible for users with this role. The visibility of menu items is only limited to the tool areas that the user cannot see by definition of the global role. Now let's have a look at the definition of the project-based permission roles. Since project roles only refer to the project area, they are much easier to define than the global permission roles, as you can see directly here in the edit mode. I only allow my project role project member to view the project details, but not to edit them. However, a user who is assigned to a project with this project role is allowed to edit all tasks on the project, even if he is not directly assigned to those tasks. Also, he can add new tasks as write permissions are required to create new tasks in projects. Tracked project times can be accessed but not edited by users with the project role project member. As explained at the beginning, the project role can only extend the global rights of a user, not restrict them. If I assign the project role project member to users with the global permission role senior, which I have just defined, it would have no effect because users with a senior role are already allowed to do more than this project role allows. If I assign this project role to users with my global role junior, as you can see here, then their permissions on this project would be extended. They would then be able to edit all tasks and view all project times on this project due to the project role, which they would not be able to do according to their global role junior, as you see here. Pro tip: if you are unsure about how far-reaching permissions for users should be designed, then rather give them a somewhat limited global role and extend their permissions via the project role on the individual project level. You know now how the permission management in awork is structured, how you can define the global as well as the project-based permission roles, and how those two role levels interact. One last advice: test your role concept in cooperation with another user, for example a colleague, so that you can test what a change in a role does on the side of a user assigned to this role.